Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for November 19th, 2019. Item number 1, if we could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brennan.
Here.
Councilmember Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras.
Here.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, we are going to have the Shakopee Cub Scout Pack 917 lead us, so if you could come forward. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Presentation of colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for leading us in the pledge.
Nice job.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item number 3, but before we begin, we want to recognize and welcome our brand new finance director. Welcome, congratulations, and we're glad to have you in our community.
Sure, thank you.
Item number 3, are there any changes, corrections to the agenda, Mr. Reynolds?
2 items will be pulled from the agenda, Mr. Mayor and members of council. That'll be item 4B1 and item 7A3.
All right. Acceptance of a firehouse subgrant and zoning text amendment to the city will be pulled. Any others, corrections?
Was it 4D1?
4B1.
Bravo.
E1.
4B1 and 7A3 will be removed from the agenda. We will see them at a later date. If there are no other changes,
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving ahead to consent business, item number 4. Any changes to the consent agenda, Mr. Reynolds?
Only that item 4B1 is no longer on consent or on the agenda at all.
That's fine. Counselors? Counselor Lehman?
I'll move the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Before we vote on that, we would read the modified consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. These are the consent agenda items for November 19th of 2019. 4A1 approves the minutes from the November 6, 2019 meeting. 4A2 adopts resolution number R2019, TAC 122, which designates individuals authorized to perform certain banking transactions. 4A3 reviews the October 2019 general fund revenues and expenditures and park and recreation yearly comparison. 4C1 adopts resolution number R201, TAC 120, which accepts a monetary donation from the Shakopee Soccer Association in the amount of $1,755, and adopts resolution number R2019, TAC 121, which accepts a monetary donation from the Shakopee Youth Football Association in the amount also of $1,750. 4D1 authorizes a street closure, suspends City Code 114.11, and supports the Holiday Fest event. 4E1 appoints Jason Aris to the rank of Police Captain at Grade 210, Step 5 of the non-union pay plan. And finally, 4F1 authorizes the execution of a professional services agreement with SEH Incorporated for design and construction services for the 2020 Sewer Service Lateral Pipe Rehabilitation Project, which is Sewer TAC 20, TAC 003.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much. I have a motion on the table and a second for the consent agenda. It's been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving ahead to item number 5. Now I'd like to call on any resident that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome. On an item not on the agenda.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Mary Isaacson. Live at 703 Lewis Street in Shakopee. I own a business downtown, Babe's Place. I'm here again. What I wanted to do is address some of your concerns from the last meeting I was here. One being, Councilor Brennan, there is no way it's going to last 20 years. I am 55. I will either be dead or I will be retired, hopefully the latter. I don't know how long I'm looking to do this. So that was one concern. The other concern, yes, I can do wristbands. I don't know to what extent why I'm not seeing it, but I will do that. I actually took a little offense that you would think that I would not card people. I am treating this, if I were to get the alley, I would be treating it as an extension of my bar. In the bar we would card out there. I run a bar. I guess you could say I'm an expert in the bar business. This is how I would handle it. All my bartenders do the liquor loss control, the tips. They know what they're looking for. This is our business. So I will, like I said, yes, we do card. Yes, we do pay attention to what we're doing. I have absolutely no issue of putting lighting in the alley. I know people have light plants. I can rent lights. I can put halogen lights up. It will be lit. I have no issue with that. What I'm asking you is, we're trying to build the community. We've always tried to build the community. That's what this is. And I have not put it out. I have not said, call your council members. Show up at the meetings. Show them that you support it. I will. You'll hear from them, but I just wanted to just get it figured out myself, you know. Um, you have, again, 700 people. It went. So, it went the Friday after I was here, which I figured that's what was going to happen. And so it went, and there was a lucky winner, and they won $8,906. We had 789 people. It was opening deer hunting. They came, and they proceeded in going to the other businesses. And so we are wanting a downtown that thrives. This is thriving. I had my first one last week. I had 140 people in there. It took me 5 months to have 100 people in there when I first started it. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how fast I'm going to hit 350. It could be in 4 weeks. I don't know. I can't give you a definitive answer. I can't give you a definitive answer on when it's going to go out. All I know is there's 52 cards on the wall. Well, now 51. And I wish I could say, well, it's going to go out this day. I can't. But if it goes out, I'm not expecting that I'm going to have the alley. It's off the thing again, It's over with, and they start it up again. But it does take time to build up. And so I'm not really I'm saying. I'm not looking for special privileges to do this for myself. I'm doing it for our community members. That's why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the businesses downtown. I just want you guys to pay attention to us. Yeah. That's what I wanted to clarify. I have written up again. I was able to connect with Jody last Friday, and we're working out something. And I expect probably to be back here December 3rd. But I do want you to give this consideration. And then a thoroughfare, that's an alley. It's not a thoroughfare. People hardly even know that the alley is there. So the beer delivery guys do. The people that are parking at the Pullman, which I have their complete support. It's not a major thoroughfare. If I was going to drive downtown, I'm going to drive around the block. I'm going to come off first, I'm going to go to second, and I'm going to turn. I'm not going to just spin right through the alley. That's not a major thoroughfare to me.
Did you, 2 weeks ago Friday, you hand out the tickets? How many tickets did you hand out? 750?
789.
89? The capacity of your
350. I had a lot in the back, in my back alley.
Right. Yeah.
And then, but again, it's very hard to get back there. So I'm trying to simplify that if we can close off the front portion of the alley, that people can go out there and stand out there.
Okay. Well, we discussed this before and sent it back to staff, and it will come before us. There's no decision in front of us, and here tonight making some more points, so that's appreciative.
And I'm asking, do you want them to call you? Did you want them to email you, to call you, to have 1,000 people here next December 3rd?
Well, as I mentioned, maybe you need a bigger bar.
Well, we'd have to ask
Or
permission if they
limit the
can stand
tickets, but-
outside.
Limit the tickets, but when it's before us, then we can discuss it again when it comes. and when that comes. The need right now is not paramount.
No, I don't, my thing is, I don't know when I'm gonna, again, it took me 5 months to get 100 people in there.
Yeah.
I got 140 in the first night.
Yeah.
So it could be in 3 weeks. I don't know. And how it's set is when I do have 350 people, which we count every Friday, I'm not saying that I'm going to have 350 people and I'm going to throw them out in the alley right now. That's not going to happen because I have to bring the lights in and, and do all that. So my thing is when I hit 350 people in my bar, then the following week, I would set into motion doing the lights and doing the blockade and doing, So I'm giving myself a week of notice that, okay, this is what it has to be. But I'll be able to judge that, like I said, when I know when I'm going to hit 350. Because at that time, I can put them in the back alley. I can house them back there, if it comes to it that Friday night.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is part of the agenda where any resident can come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we would move ahead then to item 6. There was no business removed from consent. We would move down then to 7A1, adoption of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, Envision Shakopee. Welcome, Joel.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So tonight is the night. We are here. So tonight we'll be discussing Vision Shakopee for one more time this year and for the formal adoption of the plan. So the action requested tonight would be to approve Resolution R2019-123, resolution adopting a Vision Shakopee, the city's 2040 comprehensive plan update. So, since the previous time I was up here in April, so when that was approved for authorization to submit to the Metropolitan Council, staff submitted to the Metropolitan Council on 4/29. There was one round of edits and negotiations with the council following an incomplete letter dated on May 20th, 2019, which was included in the staff report. Following this round of edits and working with the Met Council staff, they deemed it complete. And the Met Council Environmental Committee approved it formally on the 24th of September on consent. The Met Council's Community Development Committee approved it on October 7th after a short discussion. So I was there in attendance, and that discussion mainly about the orderly annexation agreement with Jackson Township and kind of what that meant for planning for Shakopee. And so that's something that the council hadn't seen before, and a little unique with what Shakopee has. So they had a short discussion on that. Otherwise, no issues on that. And then finally, the full Metropolitan Council approved it in its October 23rd meeting, and again, it was approved on consent. So a few changes in the plan. So the incomplete letter for the Met Council mainly outlined a lot of smaller technical changes, verbiage they wanted to see in the plan, changes in certain map identifications, page numbers, things like that. Some of the more major edits I'll kind of outline quickly here. So additional figure was added, figure 410. That essentially showed a more detailed and more clear breakdown of how the existing land use categories morph into the future land use categories within the plan, and also the kind of growth in the city's land area based upon the annexation agreement with Jackson Township. Figure 4.11 depicts all land uses which may support housing in the city. I'll kind of talk about that a little more in a slide following this. Finally, the potential housing needs tool matrix has been included directly in the plan. So previously that was something in the appendix, but was added directly into the plan after a Met Council request. So essentially what this tool matrix shows is all the potential tools that the city could utilize in the future to address any affordable housing issues that may be deemed necessary for these tools to be utilized. This is in no way a policy statement saying the city will or won't do any of these tools or utilize them. It's just saying that they exist. The Met Council wants us to know if they exist and that we could consider them potentially in the future. So essentially it's the repository for these various housing tools that the city could come back to reference later on, 5-10 years down the line. Just one more quick little note on figure 4.10. So this kind of was added just again to kind of make it clear about how the existing land use designations in the plan kind of correspond directly into these future plan designations in the plan. There was some confusion on the Met Council's part about how those two fit together because they did have different naming and terminology within them. But this figure essentially kind of clears that up and shows, like, for an example, the agriculture district in the existing designation is directly translates to the rural transition district. And then also then it shows those acreage by number and by percentage of the city total. And then finally the total acreage, which includes the planned annexation agreement with Jackson Township. As you can see, that acreage number creep up by 2040. And then also figure 4.11, again, I'd just like to touch on this a little bit more. So this table just depicts all potential residential units for each land use category, which could hold residential uses within them. So that includes our base residential categories, suburban residential up to mixed residential, but also those mixed use categories, mixed employment center and mixed use commercial center. So like note, the number does seem large. That's purely a number that's generated from the density units per acre and the acreage change through time. And so this is just a potential of units within the city. In no way will this actually likely come to fruition. This is something that council required just for their own documenting sake on their end for their regional planning efforts. And so this is just one more look at the plan process. So this has been a plan that's been 2.5 years in the making. And so we are finally at the end here. So we are finally, this is the last time we'll see this plan process for the next 10 years, hopefully. And so just quickly, I want to touch on some of the more initial implementation steps that we'll be taking from the comp plan after tonight. So following adoption, state statute requires cities to conform their zoning code to with the land use designations within the comp plan within 9 months after adoption. And so for an example of some issues that the state has outlined for many cities in the state is that, for example, today the Shakopee zones its parks and open space as either single-family residential, urban residential, or agriculture preservation. But for an example, we'll need to create a new district for our parks and open spaces specifically, which will be a parks and open space district with its own requirements, its own standards, and its own designation essentially in the zoning table. So that's just an example of something that will likely come out of this process. And also there probably need to be some small changes with existing zones, likely some of the commercial zones by whether it be the highway business zone or the residential or neighborhood business areas, potentially add provisions for potential housing or mixed use development within those zones to conform with the land use designations in the comprehensive plan. Stay tuned, likely a January workshop. January is usually some of the slower months, so we'll be coming back with way more detailed analysis, sit down and actually hammer out how these work and everything, a lot more detailed visualizations and everything like that. So stay tuned for that. That'll be a fun workshop, I'm sure. Next, there will also be coming, probably next council meeting to separately approve the sanitary sewer and stormwater management plans. They could have been approved with the comprehensive plan tonight, but we thought it would be more appropriate to have them approved separately under a separate resolution, just for documenting sake. And so that'll be likely coming up at the next council meeting. Additionally, I'd like to touch on the alternative urban area-wide review that the city is currently conducting in the West End Jackson Township area. So this is essentially a detailed planning and environmental study for the purposes of long-range planning and environmental study. So this study essentially touches on the full build-out potential of the Jackson Township area, which means this is a planning document that could technically cover 100 to 200 years, depending on how long it takes for this area to build out. This is something that was authorized to be conducted about a year ago from today, actually. And this plan essentially covers everything from environmental issues to land use, to water use, to sewage generation, traffic, future improvements needed regarding all of those. And this document will allow for the development to proceed without separate environmental reviews for each separate project in the future, as long as they conform to the development thresholds set within the AUAR. If they go above what the AUAR has set and designated for that area, then they would have to do additional studies based upon whatever their potential plans could be. And so this draft is now out for comment, 30-day period. The city has met with Scott County and Jackson Township throughout the entire process, so they're aware of all this. And this will likely be out back for the council likely in January. So it's out for the 30-day comment period right now. That'll require, once those comments are all back, we'll, staff and SRF, our consulting team, will go back and make modifications based upon any comments received. And just for your information, the draft plan is online on the city website on the planning page at the bottom under, there's large area studies, and the AOAR is down there. So if you want to look at it before it comes to council, likely in January, you certainly can as well. One more item I'd like to highlight. So safe routes to school, it's something that's kind of been with fits and starts in Shakopee. I think previously the city applied for a safe routes to school planning assistance grant in 2017, and that was not something that was approved at the time. But Safe Routes to School is a federally funded and state administered program which programs funds and provides technical assistance to local school districts and municipalities who are interested in improving the walkability and safety for students to get to and from their area schools. And so this would be something that's kind of been building upon the Parks and Trails Master Plan and kind of the transportation section in Envision Shakopee to help further identify pedestrian gaps and barriers in greater detail, identify specific corridors to focus future efforts on, and also, again, more detailed analysis on these school and student-specific issues within the city of Shakopee. There has been initial discussions with the school district, and they are completely on board and ready to move forward with it this time. One of the big issues last time the city applied for this grant was that the school board wasn't really on board or didn't have any clear consent with the plan, and so that's why the state, kind of one of the reasons why they didn't choose Shakopee to give that planning assistance grant to. But now we have them on board, and so likely we'll be going to apply for that grant again by the end of the year. So we'll likely be back to get your approval to apply for that grant. So just give you a heads up on that. Pretty exciting stuff. Otherwise, those are kind of the first initial implementation steps we'll be taking with the plan. And you know, as we move forward, of course, we'll keep you updated on any other implementation efforts with the plan. But with that, I'll end my presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I'll open to
Couple, just quick questions. AUAR, will that actually be a standalone document or eventually incorporated into this?
So the AUAR, Mayor and Council, the AUAR will be part of the comprehensive plan eventually. So it'll likely have to go through a comprehensive plan amendment process with this as well. So that'll probably likely come again in January, and then it'll require a 60-day comment period with the Met Council before it's fully implemented. This is something actually the Met Council recommended we partake in before we truly do get moving into development in the Jackson Township area to just really.
My other question is actually just a comment about the May 20th, 2019 letter from the Met Council back to us, labeled an incomplete review. Every councilor, mayor that I've talked to in the metro area that has gone through this process over the last year and a half, they've all gotten this letter because those are the comments back on that, the first blush of the submitted comp plans for their communities. Is that correct?
Mayor and council members, that is correct. Luckily, we had early submitted our document, so the document that you saw in April actually had some of the earlier changes made from the Met Council. The first document we submitted, I think, got back about 13 pages of comments, so it's kind of nice to get that second incomplete letter and have them be a lot fewer and a lot more specific. And I think definitely having that early submission really helped us in getting this through with the Met Council.
Thank you. Councilor Whiting?
Just one comment. You know, we put a lot of work into this document here, and it sounds like it also created a lot of work to try and get up to that standard, or at least get the labels right and everything else. So, good luck. And
Councilman Wright, thank you very much. It was quite a bit of work, but I think it certainly made a stronger document at the end of it, and something that we now can fully move forward with, and I think be proud of as a city.
we'll be seeing a lot more of the things to that we have to clean up to get there in the future you're talking about, so.
Councilmember, correct. Luckily, we have all the master files for everything, so if any changes need to be made in the future, we can just go right in there and make those changes, so.
Perfect.
Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, a couple of questions. The first is the AUAR of Jackson Township, that's going to be incorporated into this document when it's complete?
Per the Met Council, what they recommended, yes, it would be something that would be incorporated into the comprehensive plan as a further study.
And then the sewer and stormwater plans, because they're not in here,
Coming to us.
gonna
Councilmember,
be approved later and then incorporated into here?
Councilmember Lehman, so the stormwater and sewer plans have been incorporated within the plan already. So the parts that touch upon it within the comprehensive plan, within the infrastructure section, have taken the sanitary plan and the storm sewer plan within them and have utilized their data to inform them. But since those plans themselves are robust and large and they stand alone on their own, they will be approved separately as separate plans as well.
Mayor? Because the transportation plan is the same. In here, it says, pretty much for all of them, it's goals and strategies for these things, which is kind of an overview and not necessarily what the plan is. So I haven't seen these plans, and I'd like to see them at some point.
Mayor and council members, we did present drafts of the plan back in January of 2019. We will bring these plans back to you. They're required to be specifically approved by the council, so that's why they need a different action, one by the Met Council for the sanitary plan, and then with the watershed district and MPCA, we need to have separate individual approval, but they are also approved under the hat of Envision Shakopee. So we will bring them to you at the next meeting.
Transportation plan too?
The transportation plan does not need a separate approval other than under Envision Shakopee.
What point do we see the transportation plan? In here, it's just a strategy.
The transportation plan, the detailed plan is part of Envision Shakopee. There is no separate document for that. The details would be in the appendix for Envision Shakopee, but that is not a separate document. That is actually part of Envision Shakopee.
Okay, well, we got this part and it's not in here.
Well, I think we had an email the other day, the appendix was 900 pages, we're not gonna.
Right.
Printing.
Obviously, I'm not printing that off at home, right?
Well, and we decided,
And I'm not looking for all the details, I'm looking for the overviews. Transportation overview, maybe a map, some key highlight points, sewer overview map, although we're gonna see that separately, so.
Michael?
The mayor and council, most of the city, so we subcontracted to the county and SRF to do the transportation zones. So most of the city's built out except in the West End. When they saw that, that's how we ended up with the AUAR. So the AUAR is down to intersections. So that's why the Met Council asked for that, because not much is going to change in the rest of the city. The places that really are going to be impacted are the West End. So SRF, through that, did additional traffic counts that were not part of the comprehensive plan and not part of the county's contract. And so there are, because of the growth in that area, there are very specific requirements in that AUR that you will see. You saw Mr. Lilhawk brought last meeting the SRF study to do the 4 roundabouts. That's because in the AUAR, that was already identified as a critical corridor today. And so when you get the AUAR in January, it's down pretty much to road and intersections for the West End. And that was a requirement of the Met Council. So basically the rest of the city, there's not a lot of changes. Where their changes are on 169 on the West End, the on and off ramps on the West End, and new roads that currently don't exist in the West End that are planned. And so those have been drilled down to intersections and traffic control.
And Mayor, does it have updated or projected future daily trips on?
Mayor and council, correct. So in the AUAR, it has the 2040 data for the comp plan, and then full build out whenever that may occur. So they're required to do the 2030, which was kind of the existing data that was available. They took the 2040 they looked at the future, and then they looked at the comp plan and all the things planned in the West End and actually fine-tuned that down to street and intersections.
Did they do it for any other roads in the community, major roads within Shakopee?
Any, Mayor and Council, any road that was impacted by that growth, you'll see we had a discussion with the county and the township. There are some roads further out in the county that will have impacts that are caused by, for instance, the new overpass, underpass that they're building right now has, people will now take that because it's gonna be easier and there's more traffic not coming off the intersection. There are roads that are not in the city that are impacted. And there was a discussion that the county's gonna have to deal with that on their own, down the road.
Maybe I'm not clear on what I'm asking.
Well, I
what
think
I'm
we
looking
saw
for.
some transportation of some ADTs of current and in the future, many, many months ago. from
Mayor
the
and
city
council,
aspect.
so there is no more detailed transportation plan other than what's in here. So what would be in the appendix would be the transportation analysis zones. If you'd like, I could, I can get that table to
Print
you.
that part of it out.
It's, yeah, correct. So it's all online currently already in the link in the staff report. But if you'd like the transportation analysis zones printed out, I can certainly do that as well.
Well, not the nuts and bolt details, but in the past, and I know this is a different process than the previous two that I've been through. A good example would be when the state turned 101 over to the county. The state put the money out, they redid First Avenue, gave the keys to the county for ownership, and they were required to do a analysis looking out, I guess it was a life of that new build maybe, and they said, currently it's this many trips per day. We're projecting 10 years with the current rate of growth in the area, 10 years it's gonna be this. So that was the design build for that improvement. So I guess what I'm asking is, if we take our comp plan, we see our land use, we see our densities, and we project it out over X amount of years in various places, what does that do to the existing road networks that we have compared to currently?
So Mayor and Council, in figure 4.38 in the plan, which is a 2040 scenario one, no roadway improvements. If you look at the next one, which is figure 4.39, 2040 scenario two.
Can you give us a
is-
page?
Sorry.
Page 246, 247, and 248.
So that shows 2040 road improvements. They're highlighted with the traffic counts on them.
And these models were informed by the county's planned roadway improvements, since all these issues highlighted within these maps are county roads. And so a more detailed transportation analysis is likely to be found in the county's planning process.
Yeah, right here.
There we go.
There we go.
Yep.
Yep, I know I've seen these before.
And again, Mayor and Council, so this is what alerted the Met Council to do a much deeper dive in the West End. And when you see that in January, it has much more specific details on intersections and roadways.
Projected, okay, yep.
So Mayor and council
Perfect.
members,
All right, we got it.
Got it, yep.
all those things are, everything that you just spoke of, they are in a pretty robust section, right in the main text of Envision Shakopee. So
Okay.
everything you mentioned should be there.
And Mayor and Council, this was, as Joe mentioned, all of this is, the data that created it is in the appendix.
Other questions of staff? Other questions of staff? I just want to do a couple things here. I want to thank our staff at City Hall, our planning department. We wore out a long-term planner on this, and had to get a new one. 2 years in the making. Heavy community involvement, which is what we wanted. Yeah, it clocks in at 400 pages without the appendix, but it's a more readable. If I could get out the last couple old ones that I have, they're, it's tough to read. This is readable, understandable. So I really want to thank the citizens of Shakopee for this, because it's your plan, residents, and thank city staff. And also, let's fully remember too that this is an award-winning document. And we won the Planning and Context award from the Minnesota Chapter of American Planning Association at their annual conference a couple months ago. Not every community got that. We did. Congratulations. Councilor Whiting?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, you mentioned, it's a thriller. It's a good document. It's good. There's, the big ideas are exciting news that I think Shakopee can be, well, excited about and getting behind and moving forward with some of this stuff. So with that, and with all the work that the staff has done, I'd like to offer resolution number R2019-123, formally adopting Envision Shakopee, the City of Shakopee's 2040 Comprehensive Plan Update.
Second. Oh,
I have a motion and a two-way tie for the second. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Is there anything that stands out that the reason you voted no, or?
Yeah, there's a couple areas, actually. Obviously, it hasn't been a secret that I'm opposed to the extreme densities, and it looks like with the mixed use uses pretty much everywhere that you can do that higher density pretty much anywhere other than single-family residential and urban. So that's one concern. I have a concern that that kind of density is going to overtax our infrastructure. Obviously, 169 is already overtaxed. I know it's not our responsibility, but it is overtaxed, and we're going to make it worse, I believe. I also know that as you add population, the speed at which you add it requires additional services, and additional services cost money. And when you're bringing in populations with tax incentives, you're not necessarily allocating them tax dollars towards services. You're allocating them back into the project, whether it's TIF or an abatement, which is also in here for housing, which is new for us. Originally I was okay with tax incentives for good-paying jobs, and well, now we don't have enough employees for the jobs that were created by past councils. And some of the wages ain't high enough to give them the livability. So we've created a need for workers. So now we're going to incentivize the housing. I just think we're going too fast. I think a lot of the, as I call it, the fluff stuff, the big ideas, I certainly disagree with Marshall Road adamantly. I think that's a terrible place to have the park and ride. I actually believe 41 in the future river crossing is a much better location. It keeps our commercial base on Marshall Road. It sets it up for the major traffic that'll be on the future 41 river crossing, which is going to be a substantial river crossing. Hopefully I'm alive when that happens. Maybe not. You never know.
Oh, come on.
Well, should have been done by now, but,
All right.
So there's a lot of different
Well,
items
thank
that
you
I
for
disagree
that.
with.
It was a long process, lots of opportunity to be involved and comment and get involved in it, but I just thank you for that. I appreciate that. Let's move ahead then to 7A2, zoning text amendment. Kyle is going to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Before you this evening is a building materials text amendment for commercial and multifamily zones. There we go. And it's amendment to City Code Section 151.108, construction materials. So we've been revamping several sections of the zoning code, and you reviewed the residential building material standards, and now we're moving on to the commercial building material standards and also the multifamily standards. So the purpose of the text amendment was to improve the design standards and aesthetics based on feedback from the community survey. We wanted to clean up some areas of the code that were kind of outdated and some areas that we've seen issues over the years with different building designs and materials that we've permitted. We wanted to add requirements for the downtown area to conserve and improve the historic character. City council and staff have worked quite hard to get people down there and have try to get some of the historic character back on some of the buildings with the different facade loans. So we reviewed the downtown design guidelines and codified some of those recommendations from the 1999 design guidelines that were drafted. We wanted to add materials that weren't available or popular at the time of the last code adoption for the material standards. And we wanted to use table form instead of paragraphs and lists. One of the main things, one of the main reasons that we wanted to adjust this is the existing regulations don't take into account character of different areas. The requirements are all the same for all commercial districts. So a large warehouse-type building that fits in the industrial park could be built in the downtown or in Southbridge and be completely out of place, as long as they met the design requirements and it was a permitted use, that would be something that we wouldn't have much to say about. So the proposed ordinance would take into account different characters and based on zoning districts, so we'll be showing that on the table here, but we wanted to get away from the different, or from the same requirements for the one-size-fits-all situation. So some considerations when we were drafting this proposed ordinance was discussions with the entire department, including the building department staff. We're talking about different longevities of building materials. Kelly Buska, our permit coordinator, has a lot of experience. She previously worked for an architect's office, so we worked with her on that and discussions on different designs and techniques for buildings. We reviewed existing buildings and proposed buildings in Shakopee, and we also looked at other city codes. We looked at other suburban cities, and we looked at a few cities outside of Minnesota. So the proposed amendments is to a table to represent the different materials and design standards and permitted and prohibited in commercial, industrial, and multifamily zoning districts. We had different requirements based on the character of the buildings, as I've said. We have adjustments in the allowed materials and designs, and there are additional design requirements that were put into a place, such as window coverage, wall depth variation, minimum roof pitches for multifamily residential buildings, or having different design standards for stucco or synthetic stucco. That's something that can be damaged easily if it's kicked or run into by like snow removal equipment. That's something that it's a more delicate building material, so that's where it's currently allowed right now in the code, but right now in the amendment it would be lifted to, it must be greater than 12 feet above grade. So the format of the table is that looks at major building materials and also accent materials. So the accent materials are less than 30% of the facade, and the major materials are materials used for more than 30%. There's prohibited materials and features, for example, prohibiting reflective glass and covering windows in the downtown. And there's specific business requirements by zone, like 15% of window coverage for business park facades along 169. So now we'll move along to the table. So you can see on the top areas, there's the different zoning districts and then the different requirements that are in place. I hope you're able to see that on the read the text on the monitor, otherwise it's in the report, obviously. So if we can certainly review questions right now or review questions at the end on anything in the table. If you'd like, I can keep going. I do have pictures of different buildings. This is for the text part of the presentation. This is the
Some examples?
Yes, I do have some photographic examples of things that we talked about.
Well, this table's new, right?
Yes, the table is all new. Currently, it's all just text and list format.
You know, just like we had with our zoning table that we developed and now this, you know, it's just cleaner. It seems easier. It seems, I don't have to page. It's just, thank you.
Yeah, the bulk of the regulations, there is some of the text remains, but if you're coming to town and you want to build a new building, you can look at this table and say, okay, this is pretty much what I need to do. So I'll move on to the pictures. So these are covered windows that are in the downtown area. So there's a couple different ways that windows get covered up. On the right picture, you'll see that the windows are bricked over. And on the picture on the left, you can see they've been covered with painted plywood, and also there's painted brick. That's a technique that would be prohibited in the draft ordinance. If there is bare brick right now, it would be required to stay as bare existing brick. Painting the brick wouldn't be permitted. We want to keep that Shakopee brick character and have that color as an asset to our downtown. An existing painted brick building would be able to stay as a painted building, and they'd be able to maintain it. There is a draft requirement in the ordinance to not have bright or fluorescent colors or non-earth tone colors on the brick. I know we received a few complaints when a building was painted purple a few years ago. So we'd be looking to use more earth tone colors or something that's more period with the historic downtown. So these are a couple pictures from the downtown. Next is the B1 Highway Business Zone. We're looking at, there's painted precast panels on the photo on the right, and there's no windows on the back of that. That's Marcus Theater. So in the draft requirements, they'd be required to have some windows. Painted precast would no longer be a permitted building material in any of the zones. We're seeing some longevity and durability issues with the painted precast right now, so I'll have some pictures showing some relatively recent buildings that don't look that great right now, and they're not that old. So we'd like to get away from that. The picture on the left, there's varying roof lines, a lot of window coverage. This is a strip mall that's adjacent to Target. That's something that would meet the requirements in the draft ordinance, except for they have the synthetic stucco less than 12 feet above grade. So if you were to look up closer, they would just have to add some more block to the lower part of their facade. But other than that, it would meet the requirements in the draft ordinance.
So on this picture, the upper right-hand wouldn't be allowed any longer, correct?
Correct, Mayor Martin.
Neither would the lower left.
The lower left, everything, but raising the brick from the grade, right?
Yes, there'd just be it'd be a minor change to make that lower lower picture compliant.
But it has glass, it has a broken roof line, that's all what you
Yes.
want,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
So these next pictures are a painted precast building that was built in 2014. So it's 5 years old, and the paint looks pretty tired. Paint looks pretty tired already. We're hearing that. We've talked to we're dealing with several developers that are looking at coming to town. We've told them that we're looking at making this change, and some of them said, we're looking to make that change as well because we're seeing some durability issues. So we've been talking to a few of the developers and let them know that we're looking at making some of these changes. But this is an example of a building that's 5 years old, and the paint looks pretty tired already.
You know, this is just architectural design and building materials. I mean, years ago, stucco was a choice for many, and now it dated, and the long-term durability has become an issue, and these precast were the thing years and years ago, and now that they have some longevity to them, you're seeing the wear of it all and how it works. So things do change in the building material business.
So next, I've got some photos of some buildings that are older that are color integral. That's one of the requirements in the draft ordinance would be having color integral materials in precast and brick. So got a couple of photos. The lower left is that's a block building in the business park zone. That was from 2006. It still looks good. And the building in the picture in the top right is a building from 2001. Those are color integral materials, and they still look to be in good shape. Those types of materials would be permitted in the draft ordinance. And then the upper left picture is a picture related to screening of loading docks in industrial zones. So when they're directly adjacent to a roadway, we'd have requirements for landscaping or berming if the loading docks are going to face a right-of-way. So right here, this is along 4th Avenue, and there's not much screening, and the whole side of the building is truck docks. So the building that's just directly adjacent to this, the truck docks are on the other side of the building.
Turned it around.
Yes.
Absolutely. I remember that. And the second building with the truck traffic on the back instead of facing 4th Avenue, much better.
Yeah, we received complaints about this building, that the dock doors, they had different lights, red lights and green lights for telling the trucks where to go. Those lights are on in the middle of the night. folks were laying in bed and seeing, I'm seeing this flashing green light. So that's another issue that could be prevented if this design doesn't happen. This is another picture. There is requirements, or there is an allowance for engineered wood siding in the I-1 and I-2 zones for buildings less than 10,000 square feet. The top left picture is a building that was built along 4th Avenue using engineered wood siding. For smaller buildings such as this, that's something that would still be allowed today. This building, the picture of this building is a bit larger than 10,000 square feet, but it's used as a representation. It's a recent construction building using that material. Then the bottom right picture shows varying wall depths and varying heights as well. That's something that is a requirement for the larger buildings in the business park and industrial zones for the large buildings. So that's something that's existing in the community. It's zoned I-2, that's Park 2000. There are buildings that are showing a lot of these that meet a lot of these requirements. Next is the multifamily design standards. It's a smaller table. It's covering the R3 and the R4 zones. So there's allowances for a lot of the same sorts of materials that we've been seeing lately. The biggest change in the draft ordinance versus the existing ordinance is a requirement for pitched roofs to be at least 612 in pitch. Some of the designs or complaints that we received through the review process was shallower pitched roofs, like a 412 pitch, that it wasn't as pleasing of an architectural design. So for a pitched roof multifamily development, it would be required to have a 612 pitched roof, and a mansard roof would not be a permitted design technique.
I have a question on residential, the higher density here. The windows on all sides, do they have to be working windows?
Mayor Mars, members of the council, no, they do not.
All right.
So they would not have to be openable or anything like that. So next are a couple pictures. That's a mansard roof in a multifamily dwelling, and then to the right is a fiber cement siding multifamily building with varying roof lines and large windows. So that's the MWF property that was built by Target that would meet the requirements. So with that, the Planning Commission reviewed this request and recommended City Council approval, and I'll turn it over to the council for any other questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Questions of staff? I know that you guys worked hard on this. I know that you took developer comments on this, and it has been a while since we updated the building materials, which I think have constantly changed, and some of the newer building materials they look good, and I think the durability will be there. I mean, time will tell. But it certainly breaks up some of the newer buildings around the metro area. Really, the look of them is more softer, it's more appealing than the old cement square building that, just doesn't have any character. And
Yeah, plain concrete block buildings, or painted block.
Councilor Whiting?
Just a question, why do we don't like mansard roofs anymore? Just curious.
It's generally a tired, out of style aesthetic, at least at this time. It'd be something that could be amended later on.
These things come back around, I don't like them either, but just wondering why, if it was a fire issue or something like that, or just a tired look.
Can be a tired look and a maintenance issue. A lot of times they're wood shakes, and the wood shakes end up not looking great.
Councilor Lehman?
Here, a couple questions. The glass requirement on the storefront or building front. We've all watched the news and seen that we seem to see more and more cars driving through the front of buildings. So I'm a little bit concerned about having too much glass, because it seems like it's going to make it a lot easier for people to get hurt in that kind of a case. Overall, as Councilor Whiting pointed out, with the Mansford roof, you stated, well, it's an aesthetic. I mean, it's hopefully we're not doing this based on individuals' perception of aesthetics, because that's just not a very good reason. I find myself in a situation to where you have cost implications onto the developer, property owner. You have property owner rights issues. You have somebody's personal perception of aesthetics. And I think we've got to be very careful of how we do this.
I think we are raising the bar a little bit, and I think that's a good thing. I think some of the older buildings in our community and in even the industrial area or you know, they may be functional buildings, but is it good for your community? Are they keeping it up? I think this will be for new construction, right?
Well, no, Mayor, it's not, because as was pointed out, if you have a building downtown and you want to block off a couple of windows because they're inefficient and $1 trillion to replace, you're really not allowed to do that.
Well, we try to hang on and protect and celebrate our history of our historic buildings, and
Well, but somebody
we've
owns that building.
seen older buildings in our community that were brick that had windows, then they cover them up, then they put a plywood front on it or a stucco front on it. Now, over 40 or 50 or 60 years, there's 3 different fronts on it, right? And then we have a grant program trying to bring back our rich history of old buildings and trying to peel that all off to bring it back to its new look. There's 3 or 4 examples right in downtown that actually bring it back to the way it was. And are there more windows? Are there newer windows? Is the brick cleaned up? All the other stuff has been removed? I think that's a benefit.
That was a conscious decision by a private property owner who made that decision to do that.
Yeah.
They weren't forced into it.
Other questions of staff?
Maybe just a quick comment. I'm on I know the concern about the mansard roofs. Those are almost like walls. So if we're trying to do this new design feature, those wouldn't be like a 6-on-12. That would be pretty much a 12-on-12.
That's only for a pitched roof. Flat roofs
Right.
are allowed. A flat roof design would be permitted. You wouldn't be required to have a pitched roof.
Okay.
So a mansard roof, we would call a flat roof, or
Flat.
that specifically having the mansard roof feature wouldn't be permitted on a new building.
Okay, all right.
Counselor Brown?
I would like to offer an,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 02019-016.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. Moving ahead then to 784. 783 was removed, and we'll see at a later date. 784, modification for a budget for relocation costs. Michael, welcome. Hi.
Evening, Mayor and Council. So some of you are aware, we hired WSB to do our relocation, so the city is not involved in the actual interview of tenants or looking at their financials. One of the things they found, a little bit to their surprise, there's some very low-income people living in the houses on the Sweeney property. Federal and state requirements are that they have to be put in a better or like housing condition. We had one family where both of the parents have PTSD, the child has issues, and they have a service dog, and they really are required to be in a single-family home. So it has driven up our relocation costs significantly. That family alone is going to get about $60,000, because what the law requires is we have to make up their rent for the next 4 to 5 years, the differential. So they're on basically SSI right now, and so they have to go into a single-family house, and we're paying the difference in rent of about $512 a month to whatever the market rent is. And that's a state and federal requirement.
Okay. Questions of staff? I guess I have a couple. It's a willing seller situation, correct?
Mayor, that's correct. So it doesn't matter under state law, and the city attorney brought this to our attention that municipalities and counties and the state are required, even if there's a willing seller, to follow state and federal relocation requirements.
My second question would be, hypothetically, if this was taken by eminent domain, would you have the same relocation laws that apply to this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the same situation. In fact, the people that are doing our relocation for us are the eminent domain people that work for WSB. So they do all the state roadway work and county highway work throughout the region. So
Counselor Lehman?
Is it too late for the city to not purchase this property?
mayor and council, that would be your choice. I think we're talking, so we're buying it just at the appraised value. I think the additional costs that we're looking at, while it's substantial, I think they're coming out of the Park Dedication Fund. And I think long-term, this is a good investment for the city.
Other questions of staff? Other questions of staff? If not, Michael, thank you. Counselor Whiting?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R2019-124, authorizing a change in the overall project budget for CIP PR-19-002, increasing the relocation cost by $72,000 from the Park Development Fund for a total of the 2019 budget of $912,000, and authorize representatives to execute necessary payments for relocation and moving costs.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? I'm sensing you don't like this.
I wouldn't buy the property.
I guess I look at it and I was unaware that there was some income aspect to a willing seller situation. Obviously, I don't like the added cost, but I think the opportunity to obtain this property that's directly adjacent to Huber Park, that's part of our comp plan and our park and recreations facility master plan that we did, I think does make sense long-term. And there's a historic building down there that we can activate down the line, and opportunity for our culture corridor that we've talked about in the past. So, Councilor Whiting?
We don't kick people out on the street either, so these are the laws we deal with. It's a great opportunity. It costs us a lot of money. We don't like to do that, but hey, we're moving forward, so let's do that.
Motion on the table and a second. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. 7A5, authorization of eminent domain authority for certain parcels for a new road. Michael, welcome back.
Mayor and council, so this is a total take on one parcel and the corner take of another parcel on the property currently occupied by Sanmar. The one total take parcel is not currently used by Sanmar, as a separate platted parcel. They would be getting a new access as part of the road construction, so there is some benefit to the company. We've been talking to them since before our new Nate came on board. Darren and I spoke to them 6 months ago. They've been well aware of it. We've given them the appraisals, and unfortunately, they just have not moved very quickly. And I said to the city attorney tonight, I feel like we've offered them 10% above the appraised value. I said, I feel like we're negotiating with ourselves because they have not come back to us. So we informed them we were going to do this. They understand. There are some tax benefit to them if it's taken not by under threat of eminent domain. There's some federal tax benefits to them. So hopefully if you pass this tonight, we'll have a conversation with them tomorrow and be able to negotiate this out and keep moving forward. I had a conversation last Friday with their land manager who assured me we'd be getting an offer on Monday, which didn't come. So she was aware that this was on the council agenda tonight. And from a timing standpoint, this is absolutely critical. This is the last piece that we need. This road is critical because it's going to be the bypass route for County Highway 83 when that goes under construction. Engineering, Mr. Lillehog, are pretty much to getting plans ready for construction to be bid out, so we can start construction on this road in the spring. And this is the last piece that's holding it up.
Okay, questions of staff? Ongoing negotiations, is that still going, or?
Mayor and council, we will have a conversation with them hopefully tomorrow and say that you've passed the authorization. That doesn't mean we're going for condemnation, but just authorizing it to hopefully move them along. And in discussions with the city attorney, we may have to sweeten the pot. This is going to be an expensive for both parties. If we have to go through the full condemnation procedure, it would come out of the TIF cost, but it's still taxpayer dollars getting spent here. So we'd much rather not do this and negotiate a settlement sooner than later.
No, but this is a critical east-west new alignment here that betters the community, right?
Mayor and council, correct. And County Highway 83 has been designed around this road, so the county is getting anxious that we need to move this road forward.
Questions of staff, Councilor Lehman?
How many total parcels are there? Are there 2 or 3 involved?
Mayor and council, there's one total take, and there's a corner of another parcel. So you should have an exhibit in front of you. The large blue rectangle is the total take, and there's
How
a
about this
colored
corner?
triangle that's a corner that would be a roadway easement and an access point for their property.
And this whole one?
So can you show a map here?
Yeah.
If I borrow somebody.
No? So we'll have a couple questions on, so I'm looking at, so on this one, the rose or triangle piece there in the middle, that's the partial, right?
Mayor and council, that's correct. You can see the new driveway into their property that would be constructed, and this is the partial take right here.
And then the fuller take is up on the north side. Oh, leave that up there. Oh, in the blue, when you get there. Turn it upside down.
Oops.
So the blue is a full take.
Mayor and council, that's correct.
If you push this up just a little bit for the camera.
Right where the Barronshire Boulevard is written on this map.
So we understand where the triangle is, we understand where the blue is, but where the white lettering for Barronshire Boulevard, there looks like another triangle, but that's already owned.
So Mayor and council, that's owned by a holding subsidiary of Canterbury. So that's the old Upper Motor Place. They are working with us and giving us this piece here. This will become a detention basin both for them and for the roadway. So the only piece we're talking about tonight, this is the total take in blue here.
Yeah.
And then that triangle down in the corner.
Yep. So the Canterbury will be giving us right away for that other triangle. Okay.
Correct.
That answers the question. Steve?
Mayor and council members, I'm looking at that map there as well. With total take, once we dedicate the necessary roadway easement and the ponding easement, there will be a remnant parcel that remains that we would expect in the future to potentially negotiate with an adjacent property owner. But it makes sense as a total take right now. But there will be that remnant
we wouldn't be
parcels.
using right at this time.
Correct.
Right.
Mayor and council, it's this area right in here that'll be left over.
Right. Okay. Opportunity for down the line. Counselor Lehman?
Can I get my paperwork back, please?
Yes, I'm bringing it to you right now, sir. Thank you.
The total combined cost without the eminent domain fees and lawyers and stuff.
So the appraised values are in your report. I believe one is about $600,000, and the other's about $75,000.
And were these part of the original TIF of the overall project?
Mayor and Council, yes, we knew we were going to have to acquire this parcel early on, so it was included. If you remember, 6 months, a year ago, it all blended together, but we added these parcels into the TIF. So originally, this would have been an expenditure outside of the TIF district. We expanded that TIF district into these properties so that it would be 100% eligible.
I think it comes to about 651,000.
Without the added fees?
The two pieces, the partial take and the full.
Right, but you have the other cost of if you have to use eminent domain.
Right.
Do we know what that cost might be? Estimate?
The city attorney.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I couldn't give you an exact dollar amount now, but they can be substantial, and if an award comes back, significantly higher than the last offer, you're potentially also on the hook for the property owner's attorney's fees. So it's likely that a negotiated sale here is going to be higher than $597,000. It just remains to be seen.
Okay, other questions of staff?
And Mayor and Council, when we did the appraisals, was done by a firm that does eminent domain and condemnation appraisals, so we had it done at that level.
I have one more question, Mayor.
Of staff?
The future county alignment to Barronshire further to the east, what is that road?
Yeah, it's not Fourth Avenue.
No,
It's
it's
Valley View Industrial.
Valley Industrial, yeah.
not Industrial Boulevard, it's further south, one more to the south, right? Are they still lining that up?
It'll be lined up with Valley Industrial Boulevard.
Okay.
They're taking the
Not
corner
Valley
and
View,
straightening it out.
Valley Industrial. It's the main,
Yeah,
that's the Fourth Avenue of that industrial area.
yeah, it's the one that goes all the way
Yep.
toward where Honda used to be out there.
Yep.
Okay, and is that still in alignment? Is the county still looking to move
Mayor
forward
and
with
Council,
that?
yes.
Okay.
If there's no more questions of staff, thank you, Michael. Counselor?
Thank you. I'd like to offer resolution number R2019-2125, authorizing staff to continue to negotiations, but to also allow the use of eminent domain to acquire the necessary property, road, and easements for the construction of a new road.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Whiting. Further discussion? Counselor Lehman?
One more question. I realize the blue section is an empty piece of land not being utilized. Is the,
Little triangle?
no, the one that is being utilized by R&R, that's under Canterbury?
Mayor and Council, that's owned by a subsidiary of Canterbury Development.
All right.
Motion on the table. Second, further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving ahead then to 7B1, presentation on Towards Zero Deaths. And Steve, welcome. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
Yes. Mayor and council members, thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Tara Helm. I am the Minnesota Towards Zero Death Regional Director for the metro area.
I'm Scott Edgeworth. I'm also one of the directors here in the metro area.
And tonight we'll be talking to you about the Towards Zero Death program. So to get started, we wanted to review with you what our vision is with Towards Zero Death. So our plan is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on Minnesota so that we can reach our goal of 0 deaths. The mission of TZD is to move Minnesota towards 0 deaths on our roads using the 4 E's: education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency medical and trauma services. The Towards Zero Death program focuses on the application of these 4 strategies. By coming together, forming partnerships within these 4 silos, we can further the TZD program to try to reach that goal of 0. In addition, we also need to bring forth that 5th E, everyone else, to try to really work towards that goal of 0, because everyone uses the roadways and everyone should be involved in our efforts. You may have seen this graph before. On the left-hand side, in the yellow or orange area, you can see what was happening prior to 2003 when the TZD program began. There were an uptick in traffic deaths on our roadways. In 2003 alone, there were 655 people that died on our roadways. Since the TZD program began in 2003, you can see that in the blue area on the graph, we've continued to decrease that number of fatals. In 2017, I'll point out that there were 358 deaths, and our goal for 2020 is to reach less than 300 deaths on our roadways.
I have a question on that graph.
Yes.
So the red line
Yep.
just continues to go out, and that, if I read that, you say that's the trend line, but I'm looking at your chart and it says, it tells me the trend is going down.
Right. So if we would have done nothing, and if we would have had no TZD program to be enacted in 2003, then those deaths probably would have continued and reached close to that 800 number.
I got it. Your efforts have been very effective. Thank you.
So now within the whole state of Minnesota, we have 8 regions with TZD directors such as Scott and myself, with the statewide TZD manager, Christine Hernandez. In addition to the TZD directors across the state, we also have the Minnesota law enforcement liaisons. These help as a resource to law enforcement agencies regarding the traffic enforcement programs. Bill Hamas is here tonight in the back with us. He is our Metro law enforcement liaison for the Metro area. In addition, the other E that we talked about earlier was engineering. Mark Callahan, who could not join us tonight due to another meeting conflict, he is the Scott County engineer, and he wanted us to remind you all about the county roadway safety plan for Scott County, which has a lot of different strategies as to ways to reduce deaths and serious injuries here in the county. In addition, there is a regional Metro District Highway Safety Improvement Plan solicitation that will kick off in February 2020 with project applications due in June of 2020. There are federal safety funds for fiscal years 2024 and 2025 within this, with about $24 million available for those 2 years. This is open to all state aid cities within the 8 metro counties. And there also may be some funding available in fiscal years 2022 and 2023. If you're interested in what types of projects that are eligible for this, the Highway Safety Improvement Plan write-up is on the Metropolitan Council website, or you can direct any questions you may have about that to Minnesota Department of Transportation Engineer Lars and Paula.
Then we talk about safety cultures, traffic safety cultures. I know you probably remember years ago when you would go into a restaurant, what was it like? Smoky, probably it was, you had to walk through the smoke section to get to the non-smoking. We've changed that culture. Who in here recycles? 20 years ago, you probably didn't see that type of effort made. We have to change these cultures. When you look at shared values, beliefs, norms, attitudes, it's for the better. So we talk about ways of changing that culture and bringing that vision to plan that towards 0 deaths. If you look at this program here, the program growth that we've had for TZD, you can look in 2003, there was only like 82% of persons that were using their seatbelt. Now we're up over 92%. You also look at some of the other efforts, cable median barriers. What do? They keep vehicles from crossing over into having head-on collisions, which are a very vicious way to have a collision. Now we're over 638 miles of cable median barriers. Yes, sir.
Mayor, question is the ignition interlock participants 0 to 11,276. Is that statewide or just in your area?
Well, this was the studies that we did before in 2003. Now in 2008, from 2014 to 2018, they did that, they got the statistics, and that's what it came from. Oh, 2000, oh, to the current, yes, sir, that's not what it is now, 11.
Is that statewide
That
or
would
is?
be statewide.
That would be
yes.
statewide.
Okay.
Okay, continue.
Okay. When we talk about other improvements, we've seen all the, you can read these for yourself, but there are things that we've done to make this growth happen. If you look at traffic safety cultures, we didn't ask these two businesses to put our logos out. We didn't ask them to do anything for us. But they took it upon themselves to make that E for everyone move forward. If you look at one of them, it's the cement company down in Owatonna. This was taken a photo and sent to us. Then also someone driving beside this tractor trailer, Baker Cassett Company. They are trying to get that message out to make sure that we protect our lives as we drive. It says, don't text and drive. And if you read the rest of it, it says, you may be on the next shipment. I mean, these are right straightforward into your face of what we need to see.
Right.
And who in here, you think about safety cultures, when I was a young man and you talk about what they've done, I remember riding my mother's VW Bug, like a wagon van, and I was laying in the back seat. She'd hit the brakes, what would happen? We all move forward. Those are things that we've changed those cultures. And these are people doing that same stuff for us without even asking. And they've taken it upon themselves. So how do we make this go on? Success factors, commitment in our change. How do we do things every day? You know, collaboration with other traffic safety advocates, and then also promote best practices. We know seatbelts can save lives. We know airbags have been put in our vehicles to help us from moving forward in collisions. And working together, they reduce our chances of injury, our serious injury. We look at this in 2015, some of the things we've done. Some of these counties have hit that target at 0. There's 11 counties on that slide that hit 0. You say, well, can it keep continuing? And the next slide forward, there's 15 counties here in 2016.
Oh.
So would we like this whole state to be 0?
Some
Of course
success.
we would. You know, you want to see that success grow and getting everyone on board that makes this happen. So looking forward, we look at towards 0 deaths goals. In 2020, less than 300 fatalities is part of our goal, and then less than 850 serious collisions. And that can be done by just doing some simple things for ourselves and making sure that we move forward and get that 0 that we want to get. So important to our families. Regional crash data here has shown us from 2014 to 2018, we've had 562 fatalities in the metro area. It's 112 fatalities a year. If you do the math, about almost 12 fatalities a month. And then you see 3,183 serious injuries. What are these the causes of? Speed, running off road, intersections, angle crashes. We look at motorcycles unbelted. I mean, we have to make sure that we protect our lives every day as we go out there and drive. Some of the other regional crash data is from engineering. You can see intersections, run off the road, head-on collisions. Regional crash data is behavior. You see the impairment, speed, unbelted occupants, and inattention. Nowadays, our inattention is what? That little box we carry, hands-free. We think about phones and how they interact with us every day. I remember not more than 20 years ago, maybe 25, what was it? You left a message. Now you carry your life in your pocket now. People get in touch with us all the time.
The question, the speed on this, is that increased speed from people speeding, or is it increased speeds from speed limits being raised?
For the behaviors as far as, okay, I say that from 14 to 18. It could be the research or the data that was collected was from 2014 and 18. It's increased to 22%.
Yeah, was it people speeding above the speed limit, or was it speed limits raised on sections of road?
It would be speed as a contributing factor to those fatal and serious injury crashes.
Okay, so it could be both.
It could be either one, yes. But I mean, we're talking speed. What is part of those collisions that we're seeing?
Going too fast for the conditions and
right,
stuff
speed,
like that.
yes.
Okay.
Regional crash data for drivers, we're seeing the unlicensed driver, younger drivers, and older drivers. So this is just information that we've collected. And then the last one, regional crash status for modes of transportation. And you can see the different types. We've got commercial, motorcycle, bicyclist, and pedestrians. You know, any form of transportation has been listed. And then on this next slide for the crash data from 2014 to 2018, you can see the different counties involved, the number of fatalities and serious injuries, distracted driving, alcohol, speed, unbelted. Also on the bottom, you can see other type of lane departures, intersections, motorcycle, pedestrians, and also bicyclists. And on this other slide here, it just outlines the different cities in Scott County, and you can see Shakopee has had 5 crashes involving death, 37 crashes involving serious injury. And then the last.
So there continue to be ongoing problems here throughout the whole state of Minnesota and here in Scott County. Drinking continues to be a problem. People still are driving impaired. People are not always buckling up in their seatbelts. People are driving distracted, as Scott mentioned. Even though we have a hands-free driving law, you still see people when you're driving on the roadways that are still using their cell phones. People are still speeding. People are driving drowsy. And drug driving continues to be a problem throughout our state. So what if fatalities had stayed the same? So if we would have done nothing in 2003, if TZD program would not have been formed, then we would have lost over 3,000 people. So that's what that red line was showing before, as we mentioned. So year to date, as of today, there were 321 traffic-related deaths on Minnesota roadways compared to last year where there were 337 deaths at this time in 2018. So we can just remind you that that's somebody's family member, their mom or dad, or maybe their child even that died on our roadway. And even one is too many. And again, what if fatalities had stayed the same? So this is just showing you back from 2017, if you were to look forward into 2018 and 2019, over 800, or nearly 800 lives potentially would have been lost in those 2 years. In Scott County here specifically, we've been going around to different city councils, such as this one here in Shakopee, doing local government presentations to try to expand our coalition efforts here. So Scott and I, we are the regional directors here in the metro area, so we're responsible for the steering committee meetings at our regional level, but then we also are trying to build up coalitions at the county level as well. So our next coalition meeting here in Scott County is on December 13th at the Scale Regional Training Facility in Jordan at 1 p.m. We'll be working on building our action plan at that meeting. So again, we're trying to get more people on board. So that's what we're here trying to ask your city council to get more involved in our efforts to be part of that everyone, that last E.
And we talk about 0 deaths. You know, this is our goal every day. I can tell you, in my former job, I was in law enforcement for over 28 years as a state trooper. And I can tell you I've made death notifications to houses it just eats you up inside. I've lost, my own family has suffered this same goal, where my mother was killed in a crash. She was thrown from a vehicle. She took a chance, but she took the wrong chance. And so now we look at this to try to make that goal 0, and it can be done, but it has to be done on everyone. Everyone has to take their part in this. And I can promise you we're going to do our best to make 0 happen, but we know we have to get these coalitions built and get feedback from the communities and let them help us get this coalition started and make this a 0 state.
Any questions from the mayor's council members?
I have a couple. Just kind of a wide-ranging question here for our community, as we sit as city staff and city councilors representing our city. What can we do?
What can you do? You can implement different things. You know, we talk about culture changes and such. You know, maybe it's a speed regulation that you need to look at. Maybe it's asking your employees to take the extra step, making sure they're always buckled up inside their vehicles, making sure they're not distracted as they drive down the road. You know, we set the examples for ourselves and how it goes down to all the persons here in Shakopee. You know, and maybe it's just implementing certain things that'll help. You know, it comes from every corner, from engineering, from education, from enforcement. We look at everything that we can bring to the table and talk together, bring ideas together. You know, there might be a location in your city that maybe you're having traffic crashes there. Maybe we get together as an effort to try to reduce those crashes. Maybe there's some things that we can suggest. You know, sometimes it's just an easy part of education.
Well, like engineering and roadway design, is that in your wheelhouse? I mean, lately at least kind of the last 5 or 7 years, more roundabouts coming to the metro area. Those are supposed to be crash reducers and deter the head-ons and maybe still an accident, but it's you know, more of a sideways thing and we're seeing even the implementation of roadway designs in the county or rural area of J-turns. Are those are all beneficial? Are you promoting those as well?
Anything that we can reduce those fatalities, that's what we're looking at. And it lowers the severity of crash. And, you know, we just look at different aspects of crashes itself. You know, roundabouts do a lot of different things. One, they slow traffic down and you move through easily and at a more reduced rate. And then also it has less angles for cars to meet.
Right.
So those are some of the things, and maybe some rural controlled intersections that make vehicles right turn only. You know, these are things that we always are promoting. Anything that's going to help.
Right. And we also need to continue educating the public when we put in a roundabout. Sometimes there's pushback from community members. They don't maybe understand how to use that roundabout. So that's where we can come in, or other community members can get involved so that we can educate people about how to properly use that roundabout and why those are a good solution and why that's going to help us reach our goal of 0.
My last question is, you know, I think there's been some real great strides with cars. You know, a car is one of the most regulated widget that we can buy in our life, right? The bumper has to meet minimum crash and high-speed crash standards. You have airbags. It's a law. You got to wear your seatbelt. Now you can't text and drive. Those are all great. But I still look at like motorcycles. You can drive without a helmet. And are you advocates for a helmet law for motorcycles? And I haven't seen that come up as a state law lately. I saw it maybe 5, 6 years ago, but do you have a comment on that?
We always lean toward the side of precaution and education and making those right choices. You know, every day we take a chance when we drive, but we have to take it and make safety our first choice. You know, and we're always going to advocate for that.
Councilor Lehman?
Are you a state agency?
Yes, so TZD is an effort between 3 state agencies, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, bringing together changes to people's behaviors, the Department of Transportation, so changes to infrastructure and engineering, and then lastly, the Minnesota Department of Health, so bringing together that other E of emergency and medical services.
Okay. From my perspective, obviously seatbelts save lives. Did a lot of racing on a racetrack in my days. Understand the safety aspects. What's poorly needed, and this is just a unprofessional opinion, people need to have patience with each other on the roads. They need to stay focused on what they're doing and not get distracted, whether it's a cell phone or anything else. And I don't want to blame just the cell phone because there's a lot of distractions. And so I think a little bit of preventative maintenance would go a long way toward your goal. And I think you're right. I think the education piece is important. And because if people know that, it's to, you know, have patience, a little tolerance for others around you. Don't get distracted by any means. Would go a long way. Good effort. Thank you.
Other questions? If not, we really want to, Steve?
Mayor and council members, I've been working with cities since 2003, you know, the start of this program. And it's always been difficult to drill down on the cities. What can we do? And I spoke with this team, what can cities do? They start at the high end, MnDOT, put in cable barrier guard. You know, that's consistent, lane departures. There's a lot of things they did at the state level, then at the county level. drilling down with the city is the most difficult, but here's a few things that we do. Speed enforcement, we do that on the enforcement end of it. On the infrastructure and engineering end, Tara indicated some grant opportunities. So this is where we're gonna lean on this team to maybe give us a letter of support so we can score higher. So we will be, again, applying under the programs that Tara mentioned through the regional solicitation for the pedestrian bridge over 169. So how does that work towards zero death? It keeps them off county, it keeps our pedestrians and bike riders off of County Road 83, keeps them off Stagecoach at a railroad crossing. You know, have we had a death there? No, knock on wood. But it helps towards the goal. And the corridor study that you approved, I think it was at last meeting, on Marystown and Adams to do $92,000 corridor study. There's a lot more traffic out there. There's 50+ mile-an-hour speeds over that interchange. That's another knock on wood. There's a reason that me personally has brought that forward independent of development out there. We need to do something out there. Again, we'll be applying through the regional solicitation under the two different programs, the HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and the regional solicitation. So hopefully we can, again, lean on you guys for some support to help convince our state traffic engineer that these projects are important to this program, and they need to score our projects high. So that is one way. Another way that we need to look at in the future, we did the Canterbury regional area traffic study. We identified a couple safety issues. We're doing a lot of improvements that fall under the TIF funding, but then there were some improvements that didn't fall under TIF funding. We need to put a signal, hopefully eventually, at Shenandoah and County Highway 101. We need to look at Eagle Creek Boulevard. We had some, we have some high crash rates at Saracen and Eagle Creek Boulevard. We want to look at converting that to a 3-lane in the future. So there are those things that we need to do that, yes, we're not seeing deaths, but that's the problem with at a city level. They're sporadic. Right. They can happen all over. So there are a lot of things on the infrastructure and that we will be doing that hopefully we can get partnerships in the future on.
Thanks. Counselor?
There was an article that we all read, put out by the chief of police a while back about 169 from Marshall Road toward the river, something about it designed in the winter time and the wind and the blowing and the ice and everything else.
It's that pavement issue.
It's a very high crash area for some odd reason. I leave it to the engineers to figure it out, but the statistics speak for itself.
Yep. Well, we thank you for coming before us with your presentation for Toward Zero Death. We very much appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, just come speak in front of the mic.
My name is Bill Hamas. I'm the law enforcement liaison for the 8-county metro area, and I help the law enforcement agencies with the enforcement end of all of this. And as I sat here and listened to this, I wasn't going to talk tonight, but I would be remiss if I didn't get up here and tell you what a fantastic job this Shakopee Police Department is doing down here in traffic safety. Chief Tate has truly been someone that we have looked at statewide for his assistance and ideas, and that extends also to all of you because he needs your support, which he obviously gets. So on behalf of the Office of Traffic Safety, I want to come up here and thank all of you for what you have done. It is greatly appreciated. You are saving lives, so thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you very much for your kind comments.
Appreciate your efforts too.
If there's no more questions, thank you very much. All right. Moving ahead then to 8A, our 2020 draft budget review.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, while Nate is getting ready, I just wanted to touch on a couple things here. First of all, you'll recall that this particular budget follows our tax cut budget of last year. And why do I bring that up? Because as we first started this budget, we theoretically could have had a budget that came in at 2.54%. the year after a tax cut. Pretty darn impressive. But we also understood at this point that there is a time that this would be a time that we could invest in our infrastructure that, much like our sewer lining program, is going to have dividends, not today, but in the future. You know, if I'm a short-term looking administrator having a 2.54% budget increase after a negative budget increase the day before, as an administrator, boy, that looks darn good as a short-sighted administrator. The reality, however, is that we're not being short-sighted. We are looking at a budget that is just over 5.9%. And the reason is because, you know, we're making a real investment. But even with that, I think it's important to understand that because of growth, the actual benefits of growth, if you grow, the pie gets bigger, your share of the pie gets smaller. It's the way it works. Because of growth, we're actually returning to the tax rates of an average house that occurred in 2018. So I continue to be excited about us financially. This is really probably the last piece of that pie for our financial future, this investment, which I was against initially. But because of Darren Nelson, because of Steve Lillyhog, because of Nate Burkett, because of Michael Kursky, they all convinced me not to be that short-sighted administrator. So with that being said, Nate is going to present. He did the yeoman's work on this budget this year, along with Darren's help. So I'll shut up now. It's all yours, Nate.
Bill Reynolds, thank you very much for those opening remarks. Nate, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to make this fairly brief, and I'll suggest that if Nate or Bill have anything to say, that they should just jump in. Darren Nelson did do most of the heavy lifting, so I'm just here presenting. I maybe tied it up a little bit. Okay. So just a quick look at the local economy. The market value of all the property in the city went up north of $6 billion. That's about $250 million year over year, and that's followed by $250 million or so last year as well. So you're looking about $500 million in increase in value in the last 2 years. This is the fourth straight tax rate drop from about 35.7% down to 34.6%. So that's 4 years in a row, including last year's tax cut. That is inclusive of the EDA levy. So the $350,000 in the EDA levy that we moved for transparency purposes back in 2018, that's in that rate calculation. Generally speaking, this budget maintains current service levels. We do make some adjustments, and I'll get into those in a moment, but for the most part, you're not looking at major changes in our service delivery or day-to-day operations. What it does do is begin to align our capital investments, just as Mr. Reynolds just said, with what we kind of see as the long-term needs. We're beginning to close long-term gaps in capital infrastructure needs. As Mr. Reynolds said, if not for increasing our capital budgets, we would be looking at about a 2.5% increase for operations alone. Other priorities are to continue to ensure fiscal stability. That's something that we've talked about for as long as I've been here. I'm sure even the year or two before I got here, Mr. Reynolds was talking about it. One of the big things that we're doing right now is we're committing what we're calling a building inspection revenue commitment. We're going to be about $2.5 million over projections on building inspection revenues this year when the end of the year comes around. We're taking those funds and we're doing what's called a commitment, and we're tying those dollars down for future years. And we're using $800,000 of that money that we took in this year to actually pay for services that are going to be rendered in 2020 and 2021. So for example, the Canterbury project brought in, so was it about $1 million this year, right? And not anywhere near that amount of work is going to be done in 2019. It's going to take work in 2020 and 2021. So that's the principle behind carrying that money over. Because of this, we're actually able to accelerate our investment in infrastructure. We're continuing to work on transparency. This is kind of the end of that budget retooling process that we've been doing over the last 3-4 years, but we're continuing to try to hone in our projections on both the revenue and expenditure side. In the future, you can expect us to start talking more about working on diversification of revenues, specifically in Parks and Recreation. We talk a lot about that anyway, but I see it coming even more and more. We've made some changes in Parks and Recreation that I think are going to help drive that. Over the course of the next year, I expect that we're working on kind of establishing basic service level standards, working on some more accurate, greater depth to our long-term financial projections, which Nate has good experience with. He told us in our interview, so we're looking forward to seeing what he's got to do there. And then working on improving our prioritization and extending the time frame of our capital improvement plans. I think you've heard Mr. Littlehog say before he would like to do a 15-year capital improvement plan, and I think that's where we're headed. The things that are really impacting the budget this year, first and foremost, is wages and benefits. Our current contracts expire at the end of this year. We're currently negotiating, but right now we have budgeted a 3% COLA, which results in about a $510,000 increase. This year, after a reduction last year, we took a 6.5% health insurance increase, which is about $70,000 to the city's contribution. If you remember, when we took the reduction, we didn't actually ask the employees to give us, we didn't decrease the city's contribution. So this year, the vast majority of that 6.5% is the employee's response. It's actually all but about 1.5% of the actual expense of that health insurance increase is the responsibility of the employees. So that $70,000 represents a very small portion of the cost. And then this is the second year of a state-mandated increase for police and fire pensions. Another thing that's impacting us is that this is up 2020 is a presidential election year. And in addition to that, we've added a presidential primary. So now we have 3 elections. And in addition to that, the county is no longer doing the take-home ballots. So we have to staff and prepare and supply all 3 elections for, is it 45 days leading, roughly 45 days leading into each election?
Yes, absentee voting 45 days prior.
So we're not exactly sure what this is going to look like, right? So this is one of those circumstances where we're doing our best to project. $45,000 should be adequate, but it may cost more. We just don't know what it looks like in terms of, if we start seeing lines of people out the door, we're probably going to try to bring in more staff, so we're letting voters move through more quickly. Other adjustments to staffing in particular is that we're adding 2 positions into parks maintenance. These are new positions. 1 parks foreman and 1 parks maintenance operator. This stems back to kind of some studies during the parks master plan and just kind of an overall sense that we are not adequately staffed to maintain current service levels in our parks going forward. In Parks and Recreation, we're proposing a $40,000 savings on the staffing side by eliminating 1 community center manager, adding a guest service specialist, and increasing the grade of the other guest service position, and then increasing the grade of our 2 Parks and Rec managers. In engineering, we're looking at about a $14,000 increase to increase the grade of the assistant engineer and the project engineer. That's primarily to keep up with the market out there. Those 2 positions are in high demand, and we need to retain them. And then Public Works, we're going to fully implement the departmental reorganization that was actually approved last December. That includes promoting 2 of our lead maintenance operators to 4 persons, and then increasing the grade of the mechanic 4-person. So those are the major staffing adjustments for 2020. Other things are that we're in the year 2 of 4, trying to adjust the way that we're charging rent. If you remember when Darren told you about this last year, it was that fire trucks cost $300,000 20 years ago. Now they cost $600,000, and we didn't charge rents along with inflation. So we're doing a 4-year process to bring those rents up so that we're actually repaying ourselves the appropriate amounts. And then this year, one time, we went through and did a very, very detailed and accurate audit of all of our fixed assets to make sure that we are collecting rents on all of the assets that we should be, resulting in a one-time increase of $343,000.
That's the item there was a discussion about splitting.
We did discuss that, yes.
To lower the levy, but there
Yep.
wasn't consensus. Okay.
Yeah, this I think goes back to, the original point about fiscal stability. One of the great things that we have going on in this organization is that, a lot of organizations, if there's a downturn, they're not going to be able to keep their equipment up. They're not going to be able to keep their capital infrastructure up. And then that puts them right behind the 8 ball right away. They're tying one arm behind their back and pretending they're fully functional. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be making different decisions to deal with potential downturn. The revenue side, we did increase the building inspection revenues to our 3-year average to about $2 million. So that actually helps the budget by about $415,000. There again, Darren told you last year that he had a little bit of heartburn over raising the budget to where we brought it, and then we exceeded it by $2.5 million this year. So, those revenues will ebb and flow, but for now, feel pretty good about where we're at. For now, we have increased the projected revenue in the ice arena by $40,000 in anticipation of that Southwest Christian High School contract coming through. But otherwise, we're thinking that we're probably, after several years, kind of have a good understanding of what those revenues are going to end up being on an average basis. And then another one that's kind of big, it'll happen what seems like slowly, but we get about $400,000 a year in cable TV franchise revenue. This is the first year that we actually saw a decrease, 2019. We lost about $25,000 in cable franchise revenues. We're projecting that to happen again. That's in line with what I'm seeing in terms of the number of cable subscribers that are out there. And Mr. Reynolds even cut the cord, so things are happening. So,
Councilor Lehman.
But are we picking up any equivalent franchise fees from CenturyLink, was it, that came in?
Councilor Lehman, that's inclusive of CenturyLink. So yes, we have 2 franchise agreements, one with Comcast and one with CenturyLink. The total dollar amount is still going down, and in fact, CenturyLink is getting out of the cable business. It was kind of a lot of work to get that franchise agreement with them, but then they were acquired by a company, I believe, called Line 6 about 2 years ago, and as part of their strategic plan, they've decided to just get out of the business.
When you say get out of the cable business, they offer internet through the phone lines. Are they getting out of that also?
They're staying in the fiber business, but they're moving away from cable TV. And so franchises, we are not allowed by law, federal law, to charge on anything but copper wire that brings cable television service to your house. So,
Not fiber.
right, fiber is you can't do a franchise fee for that.
Okay.
So, but you do need to be aware, of that pattern, you're talking somewhere between 10 and 15 years. That's $400,000 in ongoing revenue. That's probably dwindled down to near nothing.
That was a big fund at one time.
But you'll collect it off the G5 right away, whatever fee and stuff.
Okay.
Just to hit on the EDA levy, the cap went up this year to $902,000 from about $850,000 because our market value went up. But the EDA levy for 2020 is still proposed at $350,000. It's the same as it was when we started it in 2018, and the same as it was last year. This is just a brief chart of what the actual levy is proposed at. Ultimately, did you make that update, Nate? Okay, do you want to speak to it? Because I didn't make that one.
Good evening, good evening, Mayor and council members. Good, I didn't make it through the whole night without saying a word, so that's a good thing. So I did update this slide. We actually had last year's information on it from the original copy, but the growth, when we look at, this is actually a tax capacity chart. So when you look at the tax capacity growth for 2020, it's at 9.8%, where 16% of that is new growth or related to new construction. The amount of new tax capacity that adds is 1,025,000 in total. And if you look at just that 16% related to the new growth, it's 346,000 or 1.77% that you could increase the levy and not have an impact on existing properties.
This is the typical chart that you see that shows the residential valuation changes. Yeah, the average property that was 200,000 to 250,000, the value of that property went up by 7.6%, as an example. You can see that what you're going to see in the next chart is that the property tax increase on the lower valued homes is somewhat higher by dollars, and the reason for it is that if you look at the lower end of this chart, or on the physical top of it, but the lower priced, lower valued homes, their property values are growing more quickly, which means that property taxes start to slide towards that direction. And that's this chart, where you see a $38 tax increase on a $188,000 home and a similar tax increase on a $27 home. It has to do with those price growth changes year over year. However, as Mr. Reynolds pointed out, this change, in terms of actual dollars, this property tax increase that we're proposing actually brings the average home back to what it was in 2018 for taxes payable 2018.
Say that again?
So with last year's tax cut and property tax growth, this actually brings us back to what the average home paid in 2018. It's kind of complicated, a lot of moving parts. There's probably no actual home where that exactly happened, but on the average, we're actually moving back.
And that's rate-wise. They're paying the same rate as 18.
Roughly. No, not rate.
The rate has fallen for 4 consecutive years. We're
Right.
talking about actual tax dollars.
Okay.
Right.
I'll look that up.
So the average home is going to be paying roughly the same amount in 2020 in city-only taxes, not talking about school district or county, in city-only taxes as they would have in 2018.
So when my personal house is in that higher bracket, that middle picture of $39 tax increase. I got my statement the other day and I have a $7 tax increase for the city. So it's quite a bit different. I mean, it's a cheeseburger for
mine's
the year.
50-some.
So,
Yes.
so I think it's great.
Yeah, property taxes are complicated. We have the most complicated property tax system in the nation, hands down, but
There's some serious fluctuations happening, even in the same brackets of valuation. There really is. I know my mother's is like $300 up. Mine was a little over 200, and that's all combined, county and every. Met Council went down this year.
Look at that. Did you say something nice about
The
the
Met Council tax went down.
And the other
Mine
went
did
down.
not.
Which I have under other business. So
There's another
I'll
shoe
raise
to
that,
drop.
my question under other business
That's
on that.
All right, continue.
This is just the 10-year levy history. You can see, again, when you look at the tax rate, we have 4 years. Since 2017, we've gone down. Here, this is the typical property tax capacity and tax rate comparison. This was one of Darren's favorites. He'd talk about it more than I do. Preliminary levies for comparable cities. You updated this one, didn't you?
No, this is good last year's.
You're both charts.
We're still on, oh, these are still
All right.
last year's. Oh, so I left this last year's in and next year's, just to kind of show you where we sit. Last year, we were the very lowest. And this year, we kind of sit in the middle, amongst others. And I've heard a couple more coming in that aren't in this comparable list that we're right in the average for what most
Right, because
cities are doing.
they're
right now.
not, these might have been preliminary
Mhm.
or max. They're adjusted up or they're adjusted down.
Yep.
All right.
And then I'll let Nate speak to this one.
Mayor, Council, just to make one comment on the last slide too, they are based on the preliminary levies, and the state usually releases a report based on the preliminary levies that comes out in November that shows the statewide average property tax change for the cities, which is also a nice kind of comparison just to see if you're in the ballpark of what statewide is happening. On the slide here, so this is the annual cost of comparable cities based on three different things. It would be the property taxes on the median value home, the water, sewer, and storm charge based on 60,000 gallons, and you can see the comparison and where we fall. The median value home on this chart, we use the, I forgot the name of the website, but it was a website that had all the median value homes throughout statewide, so it was a couple years older, but it allowed us to compare at least on a apples-to-apples comparison. And it's based on the 2019 cost too, as opposed to 2020, which is yet unknown.
And I think if you remember last year's chart showed, we were still in about that same lower third position. While we were showing our 2019 numbers and others were showing their 2018 numbers. So we're still maintaining, as best we can tell, kind of that lower third overall cost of living. Brief general fund summary. The one thing I'll point out is something that you haven't seen before. That's in the very lower right-hand corner. That's that $795,000 of committed revenues that we are talking about. You're going to see that this year, at least this year, probably next year, and probably the following year as well, is kind of the current plan. My guess is that depending on how revenues come in 2020, we might have conversations about taking that out even further.
And that is comparable, if you will, to what we do with our community center memberships. We will get a membership for a year, and it's all paid at one time. But the expenses of that are in 12 installments. And that's the same thing here. Mr. Kursky can get a big check one day in November, tomorrow. We have to have that in this year's income. But the reality is that probably none of that is going to be spent in this year.
Don't expense it or as you
It
go along.
It will be spent in the next year and possibly the year after that. So we're trying to be very upfront that income in this year does not necessarily mean it's going to be used this year. And this will allow us to track it, which we've never done before.
Well, and the work ain't done this year, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have a question on that, Mayor. Where it says prior committed funds, is there a better way of identifying that?
They're committed.
There's a GASB 54 term, which is committed. That's what we're using. Committed is it's not legally required to be spent on anything in particular, but the council has chosen to commit it to a particular purpose. So you can commit it to that, and you can uncommit it. I'm correct in that, right, Nate?
That is correct.
And so we thought that was the best language to use because that's the designation that you'll also see when we do the audit in the CAFR.
I mean, if we know we're using it for that purpose, we should
Earmarked
probably.
for the future expenses of those permits.
Right.
I might agree a little bit that prior committed funds, we should have a little more documentation that once this all gets approved or that it's in there as stated rather than, unallocated. It's not unallocated and it should never reflect that it's truly committed for a specific purpose.
And that's what the designation committed means.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, but an average person reading that doesn't know what it's committed to.
Right.
Mayor, Council, I think that's a good suggestion. So the word committed is the term that they use in the standards, but you could add committed for whatever it might be and add in a further description, I think might be helpful to help
Committed
identify it.
development fees or something.
Yeah,
Something.
we'll take a look at that.
We can
and-
come up with a.
Yep, yes, sir.
Okay.
So after today, your next steps would be on next council meeting, December 3rd. We would actually be seeking approval of the EDA levy, and then you have to hold the statutorily required budget public meeting. We'll briefly do this presentation again, and then December 17th, we would be doing actual approval of the levy and the budget, and then also the 2020 fee schedule at that time.
And we specifically are doing it this way for not only transparency, but for giving the public the opportunity to come in on multiple occasions and discuss the budget. There are times where, you would have this presentation and it would be the public budget meeting, and then the next thing, the gavel goes down and we've approved the budget. That really isn't very transparent because the public hasn't had the opportunity, whether they want to or not, to participate in a discussion and then think about it. And then, so we are specifically drawing this out, if you will, to give that opportunity.
So, I apologize here. Well, I guess Councilor Brennan, I had my tax statement too, but I can't find it right now, but I believe that we have a date on there for residents if they want to come in, and that's December 3rd.
There should be a notice on the
Yep,
tax
December
statement.
3rd at 7.
Yep. So, they're obviously always welcome and comment on this, so. A couple more opportunities here, December 3rd and then December 17th.
December 10th. December 17th will then be the final approval.
Right.
Yep.
That's all I've got.
Yep. More, okay. Questions of staff? So, I know we're kind of almost past that point, but real opportunity to split that infrastructure and rent situation to lower the levy, but I tried that a couple times, it didn't work.
I'm with you.
Wasn't a strong consensus. Values are up of homes, which I think, your home's an investment. It comes with that with taxation, and those are always difficult situations. I think the investments that we're seeing that help from the baseline of 2.54 to get us up to 5.9, I think really are investments in the future. They're not they may appear like one-offs, but we're investing in our future, and I think that's wise. As we talk about a comp plan out to 2040, and we try to do some more long-range aspects of it. If we get a CIP out 15 years, and that's pretty far out, but at least I fix this here, I might have to invest some more in 10 or 15 years. At least you can draw that out a little bit and get away from those emergency situations, or, we had a road failure this year that was unique, so those are kind of my comments on the budget. There is no action in front of us, but certainly staff would entertain comments. Councilor Lehman?
The investments into the future, you've got 200,000 levy for park development. You got 500,000 for road, some sort. Do we know what them improvements are?
Steve?
For the park, mayor and council members, for the park development, just generally, it would be not any specific project. It would be just as a whole, the revenues for all of the projects, if you will. The park dedication fees was really the only revenue coming into that fund. And with all the projects that we have in the park development fund coming up, with all the master planning that we did, we needed to subsidize it out of the general levy. So that's where the $200,000 is proposed to be added to it. So that'd be the park development. And then similar for the capital improvement fund, with all of the different projects that we have, including our participation in the county highway projects, County Road 42, County Road 83. There needed to be additional money to support our street maintenance and the expansion projects that we have lined up. So not necessarily just one individual project, it's all the projects as a whole that we have planned over the next 5 years.
Do you, for our street maintenance program, do you think that cost is pretty static?
So out of the operating budget, so we have capital improvement projects and we have street maintenance out of the operating budget. Static, no. In this budget proposed for 2020, we increased just based on the cost increases that we saw in our street seal coat projects. We increased it by $80,000. Right. So that's not static by any means. That was a pretty substantial cost. We looked at between 2018 and 2019, we saw as much as 18% increases on our projects of that nature. So big increase. And today I looked at in the engineer news record, the construction costs index. Amazingly, for nationwide, it was average over the year, it's at 1.8%. I'm scratching my head on that a little bit, but that is what the numbers are. And then drill down to Minnesota, it's at negative 0.5% average for the year. So we saw 18% on our actual projects. So we'll see. I don't believe those numbers, but they are, they're an average over a lot of projects. So that's the story.
That would warrant some investigation for sure. Supply and demand.
Right. Well, I think that's what
part of it.
Demand is driving it, and then the supply and the trying to get the jobs. If you don't bid them right, that's why I get them out early enough, and then you come with a late project or so. Mr. Reynolds.
And let's not forget that we've got a lot of building going on. And there is a neighboring community of ours who had a major road project where they didn't get any bids.
Right.
This year, and they had to go rework it, and they got one bid.
From 0 to 1, how competitive is that?
And so there's a lot of work going on in this area, and so that's probably where you're seeing that premium on. But we don't have a choice. We have to do these things, and that's the key.
You can pay for it now, or you can pay a lot later.
And one more point I would make would be the development and that Shakopee's seen historically. So we had a lot of new roads being built over the past 20 years. Well, now those new roads, there's a lot more of them, and we're having to start to do more in-depth maintenance on them. So it's just not linear. Our costs are not linear. Because of that. When they were new, we didn't have to do anything for 10 years on them, right? And now we're beyond that, and we're seeing increased costs on a lot more roads. So just a point.
That's fair enough. More questions of staff? More questions of staff? No action required of us tonight. If you don't have any more questions, we'll move on. Obviously, if you continue to read the document, send your questions to staff. And moving ahead then towards 9A city bill list before us for your review. And then we have liaison reports and administration reports. So, Councilor Brennan.
Let's see, I went to Scale, the Scale General Meeting, and they had a presentation by the Met Council on who they are and what they do. I don't know. It was okay. Went to the League of Minnesota regional meeting on November 14th. Listened to a presentation by Deed and the Minnesota Housing, and there was a panel of speakers on the first responders and mental health and what we can do as a council to support the police and first responders. I thought the Deed presentation really was, we're really doing what Deed is recommending, which is innovation and being prepared for businesses to come in. Minnesota Housing really talked about the need for more affordable housing, and I think that's just going to be a constant discussion out there. And one of the things that they talked about was affordable housing for the job market. And I just hope that we take a look at, are the affordable housing really benefiting the employers that are in the city of Shakopee? I went to the Scott County Commissioner meeting this morning, listened to a presentation by Beacon Interfaith on supportive housing in Scott County.
Thank you very much. Counselor Lehman.
Shakopee Public Utilities meeting. To answer the question that was brought at the last council meeting, audio visual upgrades. First, they put in a secondary protocol so that two people check it at the beginning of the meeting and make sure it's actually working. But they did put into their draft CIP for next year for an upgrade to the audio visual equipment. So that should be addressed next year. The other one was, yes, the changes in the comp plan about the city and the water has been fixed through staffs. What else do they have? They're trying to get the full system flush in this year. The weather's been pretty good, so they think they're gonna be able to do that. There's only 5 or 7 hydrants left, and they won't do it if it's freezing, because obviously you're gonna make a water mess in the ice skating rink on the road. Exercising the hydrants. A 4-inch water main break on Scott Street, somewhere second, third. It's a 1950s pipe. They repaired it. Apparently there's gonna be a road project on Scott Street where they're gonna go in and redo that whole line. I apparently put a bigger line in too. They did change their notification policy, revised it pertaining to scheduled outages of more than one location. So if it was like a single family house, if you're doing something and the meter comes off, they'll let your electrician that you hired tell you that, hi, I'm here to work for you because you hired me. But if it's a bigger area, they're gonna do the notification themselves. Even if the contractor says they're gonna do it, then they'll get notified twice, just to prevent what happened with the Enclave. Half was notified, the other half wasn't. I think that's all I had with utility. A couple of outages, 2 of them. One of them was Excel's issue. Oh, the other thing was the Excel Energy 3-year rate increase. Got a copy of that to share with the rest of you if you haven't seen it already. It's gonna be pretty substantial if it passes at its current request over 3 years. On an average thing, it turns out to be like 17-18%. They don't always get everything they ask for, so we'll see what happens through the Minnesota Public Utilities.
Now, I was looking in that article, there was a state advocacy group about rates. It's kind of a standalone organization that tries to look out for home people that, on these big increases, because Minnesota Power's having one for 10%, Excel's having one, and as they go to their regulatory body, the Utility Commission for that, this other standalone organization does look at those rates. And I thought that was good. I'd like to hear from those people on that.
Yeah.
Because power costs are going up.
And, you know, it's kind of strange because of most of our utility power is renewable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure what's driving it. Must be infrastructural or I'm not sure, but we'll see. At least ours local here, we're not, I don't think they're projecting that kind of an increase, so that's good for us. What was the other thing with the utility? Oh, we went over their draft CIP. It's just in a draft form. Once that gets shored up, I'll bring that forward for staff to share with the rest of the body. The AMI, automatic management meter infrastructure, both on the water side and electric side. It's going to be a costly venture.
Yeah, it sure will be.
There's pros and cons. I mean, nobody likes government spying on you on one case, but if, like happened to me, I got a notification saying, gee, you're using a lot of water in your house. I'm like, well, I ain't using any. What's going on, right? Well, the thing in the water softener was going, and it was going right down the drain, and so it was nice to be notified right away. Otherwise, I would have had a pretty substantial bill. So with the new system, once that's in place, they'll be able to notify somebody right away and prevent the waste of valuable resources. Highway 169 Corridor Coalition, I did attend that meeting on the 14th. Great presentation by Ames Construction Project Manager on the 169 interchange. MnDOT did a presentation of the 13 freight access in Savage at the ports with Yosemite and Dakota. I don't know, I think we all seen that project. Where there's a bridge over Dakota, where instead of having the semis at grade trying to make the left turn into the ports and stuff and between traffic, that it'd be a bridge with an off ramp where the trucks can actually make that movement without busting up traffic, and then have the on ramp back onto 13. And this council actually supported that project by resolution, which was great. That project is a go. That is going to happen. MnDOT took the lead on that project now because they want to do a larger corridor study from 169 to Nicollet Avenue. Long-term vision on that whole corridor, but they are going to do the Savage Port project, which does kind of help 169 because it keeps a good steady flow going. The 41-169 overpass project, $80 million project. Roughly 30% of that project cost is being paid for by Scott County's wheelage tax that we all pay. There's talk at the state level of implementing a 7-county transportation tax. The drawback from my perspective and the coalition's perspective, one of the things we talked about was, well, we know that 30% of that project cost is being paid for by the wheelage tax that we're paying, so it's going to directly improve our infrastructure in our region. If the state goes to a 7-county sales tax model, we could be paying in as one of the counties and not necessarily seeing the benefits coming back to our area. So
it's like the transportation groups too as well.
So the discussions aren't really talking about that, but what's being discussed is Scott County, if they're allowed to keep their transportation tax, and they haven't approved this, but this was just some conversation, if they're allowed to keep their transportation tax and not go to this 7-county thing where they can allocate their dollars, they'd like to start allocating money in the future, and I think it was 22 or 23 to an additional lane on 169. So obviously something that's sorely needed in our area and serves the regional benefit, no doubt. So that's kind of critical from my perspective for Shakopee and the surrounding area. They did elect officers. They do that yearly. Kevin Burkett, Prior Lake Council, will be a chair. I will be vice chair. John Ulrich will be secretary. Bruce Hunstead will be treasurer. Beard, Vance, the current chair, will be additional officers. We're working on the newly selected time for the 10-year, which will be next year, sometime in October. The chair and vice chair got nominated to head up the co-chair of the committee for that event, so I'll be working on that.
There you go.
And I think that's all I have.
Councilor Lehman, thank you very much. So on November 8th, I had a meeting with a nice group of seniors at the community center. Talked about growth, we talked about senior housing, we talked about the community center. Great opportunity to meet those seniors and get engaged with them. Also had a meeting with Jay Tobin and Trey at the ice arena. Talked about everything ice and did tour their new glass room that's for rent. If you're looking for a cool spot, that it really shines. It's a pretty cool room, and I enjoyed that. The other day on November 14th, I went to the Metro Cities policy adoption with Councilor Brennan and Councilor Whiting, and the League of Minnesota Cities was there. They had housing topics, and then they had a mental health for our first responders, and that I want to make sure that we're doing enough in our community to check and on the health and welfare of our first responders. I think that's real important. Then there was a follow-up article in the Star and Tribune on the mental health for police departments the other day. We also did receive, gave to Chief Tate, these drug disposal things that are it deactivates the drugs, and I got several of them. I know we had some when we handed out those for Night to Unite. Today, went to the presentation by our consultant for our Innovation Shakopee U Center. Heard from the consultant. They're in town today, meeting with staff and other major players. They'll be here tomorrow as well, so that was great. And then, as we saw today, the Cub Scout pack led us in the pledge, but prior to the council meetings, I took a 45-minute meeting with them. They had a full sheet of questions and want to know about what the mayor and the council does, and walked them through the agenda. I showed them our packet, and they said, "You had to read all that?" But a good thing.
Destroying is
Yeah. So great opportunity there for our youth. But that's my report. Councilor Whiting?
Thank you. Went to the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities presentation. What I kind of, they talked about, the deed commissioner talked about all the grant opportunities. And I'm sure our grant writer knows all about them. And but there's a lot of money out there through deed, and getting into that is good for us. And I think there's just so many different layers that you can write a grant for. And the housing commissioner, as Councilor Brennan said, talked about the affordability of housing and gave a good example. I think San Francisco, with all the costs of property and people that the working class folks, they can't get a cup of coffee because they can't afford to live. The workers can't afford to live in the community. So it's a good example of keeping an eye on all the needs of the community wherever you're at in life. But that's what I had, and that's about it.
Thank you very much. Councilor Contreras.
Thank you. So last night I attended the school board where some recognitions were given, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about them. Out of several hundred middle schoolers, 9 of our students from West and East Middle School were selected to participate in the ACDA All-State Honors Choir on November 16th at Maramita High School. And I'd just like to say out of 100, so that was very good. I was very impressed. Also, for the first time since 1981, the Shakopee football team qualified for state. The Sabres played in the Class 6A state football tournament on November 7th against Lakeville North. Congrats to all our players and coaches on all the hard work, and kudos to the parents, because we have to drive them out there. We have to take them and be there, and they made it this far with the support of their parents. This morning, I attended the Scott County Board of Commissioners meeting where they held a workshop with Beacon Interface Housing Collaborative to discuss the need and interest in developing a 40 to 50 unit family supportive housing development here in Shakopee. And the idea was to understand what it would offer and what it would take to do this. And this afternoon, right before we came, I attended the Innovation Center meeting with the community and the HR&A consultant, where we talked about what we believe the Innovation Center meant for each and every one of us. And I think that all this was great, lots of learning. And, to when we get to these steps, make educated decisions. That's the whole idea. We go to these to educate ourselves. Not, meaning that we'll support each and every one, but the idea is to educate and make an educated decision at the moment. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Councilor Contreras. Mr. Reynolds, administration report.
The only thing I wanted to touch on for council is that in the last couple of weeks, senior staff has begun analyzing in general at this point what to do in case of recession. I think that there's a lot of troubling signs in the economy, and so last week I led an initial discussion on several areas of concern and kind of picked 3 of those that we'll be focusing in on in the upcoming weeks. It will have an effect. It's already having an effect on our union negotiations. I am not in favor of extending a contract for longer than a year, frankly, at this point. I think that it would be nice to have a 3-year contract and have it all sewn up and not have to worry about it again, but I don't think that that's in the best interest of the city as a whole. So I have made that communication to all the union representatives, and we're continuing those negotiations, but until I can get some clarity, I think we owe it to the organization and the city taxpayers as a whole to only look at 1-year contracts. So we are looking, I just wanted to let you know that we are analyzing, starting that process of looking into the future as best we can, obviously, and starting to put the pieces together on what we would do if a recession did hit, and obviously various stages of a recessionary period.
Well, I appreciate that. Councilor Lehman?
What's some of the signs of recessionary fears that are we looking at?
The problem is that it's all jumbled up. At one point, you have consumer confidence is really high, but we're starting to see some instances of layoffs. We even seen layoffs in this particular in Shakopee itself. There is talk about negative interest rates at the national level at this point.
Negative, the yield curve inversion that
you have the
happened a
yield
couple-
curve inversion is currently in effect. There are multiple things, and even if a recession doesn't happen, great. But I think we owe it to at least start having those discussions now, so we're not taken by surprise if recessionary activity does occur. My hope is that it's not going to occur, but we also know that traditionally every 10 years we start to hit that point of where there is some kind of recessionary activity. Normally, we're over that from the last time, or right at the edge of that. So there are a lot of factors. There are also, like I said, are factors that aren't in favor of recessionary activity. The real issue, and I don't want to get too much into monetary policy, but so how to start this discussion and make it quick. Essentially, all the tools that the feds use to control recessionary period have been exhausted when it comes to monetary policy. There's not a lot in their basket, which means that if there is a recessionary period, they don't have a lot of tools that they can use to try to battle that. So suffice it to say, from a leadership perspective, we have some concerns, and we're going to start.
I think actually, this came up when we did our strategic planning over those 2 sessions that we had, was how do we prepare, let's start talking about it, or prepare, and what does it look like if that happened, right? So I think that's a prudent, strategic thought process there. You know, things are going along here, but as the longest economic expansion, but, you know, about every 10, 15 years, we get a recession, right? And for all sorts of different reasons, so we'll see. All right, let's move on. Item number 10, other business. Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, I just had one. The Met Council tax decrease caught my attention.
Can you speak a little louder into the mic?
It caught my attention enough to ask, to learn a little bit more about it. So is the taxation level by the Met Council different for cities participating in the livable communities? I mean, what changed that they lowered taxation?
Shakopee's pie got bigger.
Well,
I don't know what goes into there. We should contact Deb Barber, or maybe she.
yeah, do we have somebody here that does that, or do I just do it myself, or?
You can feel free to contact Deb. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. I was trying to remember. I don't recall in my tax statement that I received that there was a decrease from the Met Council. I don't know. Maybe I need to go back and look at that, but.
I'll have to look at mine again, maybe. My one crazy eye might have been seeing it wrong because, but I'll check again. It did catch my attention.
I thought your friend's other went down as well.
Yeah, mine went down $3.50.
All right.
I know.
Any other business before this council? Councilors?
Nope, but
If
I'd
not-
like to make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019 at 7 o'clock.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned at 9:40. Thank you, everybody.